I got told to clap. I'm not professional. I'm back. I'm back. It feels so good. I'm so happy. This is like something I just really missed. And I did have a few people ask me if I was going to do it again, and I said no. So this is going to be a bit of a shock to the system, isn't it? I've got a real good is a doozy. Is that a word? Is that the right word? Regardless, it's a real good case. So I want you to, if you're interested, anyway, if you like supernatural stuff, you can always come back on the Supernatural Week. But we're gonna do true crime as my first. Welcome back to the internet, Dom. And this case, not gonna lie, bit mad. Little bit mad. First of all, before I get into it, let me just explain where I've been. So first things first, you might have noticed that in my other videos, I did just kind of private them, but they'll be back up now. I had black hair, I now have ginger hair. I also have an addition to my face, which is a piercing. It was my first piercing. I literally got it today. Called the piercer an expletive. I called her an expletive. Not gonna say it because we're child friendly over here. We're not. If you're under 18, viewer discretion is advised, I guess. I possibly would get parental guidance on this video. And any video that I may post in the future. It's gonna have some gore, it's gonna have murder, and it's gonna have, you know, true crime, some spooky stuff. So, yeah. Anyway, you also might notice that you are viewing me in beautiful HD. I also have a microphone. And I was just going to film on my phone, like I used to, but I decided not to do that because I have these beautiful tools at within grasp of my sausage hands. Should we get into the case? Because I feel like I'm rambling at this point, but I'm just super happy to be sat here again and talking to you guys about this. You're going to enjoy it. It's a doozy. I said that word again. Still don't know if it's an actual word. This case is actually based way back in the day, in the 18th century, and it's the case of Julia Martha Thomas. Now, if you haven't heard of Julia Martha Thomas, don't go and research her before I tell you, because I'm gonna tell you the story, but I would highly advise researching it afterwards because it's got twists, it's got turns. So this case is also called the Barnes Mystery and the Richmond Murder, and as you may have guessed from that, the murder was based in Richmond, in London. We'll start off with Julia Thomas. Julia Martha Thomas was a school teacher, and not much I can really find about what school, what ages she taught, but the only other thing that I could find on her was the fact that she was widowed twice. Her second husband died in 1873, and she lived alone at 2 Mayfield cottages, which is based, as I said, in Richmond in London. The names of this cottage it switches up a little bit. So you can have 2 Mayfield cottages, but you also will find that it's also called 2 Vine cottages. And if I slip up during this, then that's the reason why. Because I'm just getting confused. But I do mean the same building. So the area of Richmond wasn't overly populated back in 1872, but she did live relatively close to a local pub called the Hole in the Wall, and I believe that was quite popular. The Hole in the Wall is actually being renovated. I don't know if it's finished yet, but I'll give you details on that later because that kind of comes into play here a little. Julie was described as having a very eccentric and excitable personality and temperament. She would travel quite a lot, and she would often just disappear for months without telling anyone where she was going, what she was doing, where she was. She'd just kind of up and leave, and that was normal for her. She liked to travel. Julia wasn't a wealthy woman by any means, but she did have the desire to be quite wealthy, and she would often dress as if she was. So she would put out that front of, yes, I've got money, but behind the scenes she really didn't have too much. Regardless of the fact that she wasn't that wealthy, she wanted to still give off that impression that she was, so she would live the lifestyle of someone with money back in that day. So she would employ servants to come and live with her and, you know, help her and just basically do the stuff that she asked them to do. None of them really stuck around for too long though. She was described as being a harsh employer, and she seemed to have some irregular habits that people kind of struggled to keep up with. I couldn't find too much information on what those irregular habits were, so I'll kind of leave that to the imagination, I guess. But people just didn't stick around with her. She wasn't very nice to work for. January 29th, 1879, Julia actually hired a new maid. This maid was called Catherine Webster. She would often go by the name of Kate, so I will most likely refer to her as Kate. Now, a little bit of background on Kate, because she's quite a crucial part of this story. Kate Webster, or Catherine Webster, was born in Killaan. Is it Killaan? Killeen? I don't know. My pronunciations are terrible, and they're going to be terrible for the rest of my life. Please correct me if I'm wrong. I don't know if I've said that right. Anyway, she was born in Killaan in County Wexford in 1849. Kate grew up in quite a poor household, but her household and her family were quite well respected in the community. As Kate was growing up, she started to gain a little bit of a reputation for being a bit of a troublemaker. Kate was no stranger to crime, and she started to gain a little bit of a reputation for theft, which would eventually lead her to getting arrested. By the time that Kate was 15, she was already imprisoned at Wexford for larceny. Now, larceny is, if you don't know, is basically theft. She was stealing. She liked to steal. Kate was in prison for an uncertain amount of time at this point, but she was eventually released, and when she got out, she decided she was gonna steal again and just raise some money to get out of Killaan and Wexford and go to Liverpool. By 1868, Kate had raised enough funds to be able to get that ticket to Liverpool, so off she went. Now, once she arrived in Liverpool, she hadn't really got much of a plan, so she began pickpocketing, but Kate wasn't that great at it. She wasn't that great. She got a reputation again. She got caught again. She went to prison again. This time when she was arrested, she was sentenced to 4 years of penal servitude. I can't remember what penal servitude means. Hey Siri, what's penal servitude?
Penal labour is a generic term for various kinds of forced labour which prisoners are required to perform, typically manual labour. Shall I continue?
No, it's okay, thank you. The more we know. I probably should have put in little descriptions in my little Word document, shouldn't I? Should have come a little bit more prepared, but I feel like that was a fun little thing to do together. Ask Siri things. So during the years that Kate had left Killaan to go to Liverpool, she actually claimed that she had got married to a sea captain. This led her to change her name to Kate Webster. But this sea captain isn't really anywhere in the history books. This mysterious sea captain and Kate apparently had 4 children. And according to her, she gave birth to all the children, they all died, and so did her husband. But there's no record of this at all, and Kate was known to tell lies. She wasn't the most trustworthy person, and I don't want to say that it was a lie, but there's no record of it. I can't say if it's true or not, but she changed her name, and this becomes like a regular occurrence for Kate. She does like to change her name quite a bit. Again, something that we will cover later down the line. We're going to get to all these fine little details, don't you worry, I've come prepared. Kate was finally released from prison in January of 1872, and she decided that she was going to travel to London to become a cleaner and a maid. But Kate just could not stay out of crime. Kate would just continually get into trouble, and she would constantly dip her toes into the theft world again. But this time Kate had a little bit more of a plan. Kate decided that she was going to rent rooms in boarding houses and then just loot them. She would go in, take everything that was valuable. Again, Kate was arrested, and is it any surprise? This time she was arrested for 36 counts of larceny. This gave her a sentence of 18 months imprisonment at Wandsworth Prison. She got out and straight away was arrested again. She was put back in for a further year for more charges of larceny. So a couple of moments ago I told you that the mysterious sea captain and Kate had 4 children. She lost the children and it was all very sad, but there's no record of it. But this time, when Kate was released from prison, she did fall pregnant again. She had a son who she named John. She didn't know who the father was. There was speculation that it could be a man named Strong, but she was unsure. No one ever really found out who the father was. This man named Strong would also accompany her on theft jobs and other crime jobs, so they were together quite a lot, so he was a real strong possibility of being John's father. Kate would also say,
I can't connect to the Wi-Fi network. you might want to check the connection settings in the Google Home app.
I'm sorry, but that was real rude. Kate would later go on to say that she felt like she was forced into crime by Strong, saying that she was forsaken by him and that she felt she needed to support herself and her son. Kate would often change her name, and she went by many, many different aliases in her time in London. She would move around West London quite a bit, and with a move came a name change. Kate would go by Kate Webb, Kate Gibbs, Kate Gibbons, Cape. So she would go by Kate Webb, Kate Webster, Kate Gibbs, Kate Gibbon, Kate Lawler, and Kate Webster. How did I forget her name? Hi, I'm Dom. Welcome to the video. During the time that Kate spent in prison, she obviously had her son John to think about. You know, he was still a young boy, possibly a baby at this point. So she decided to let a woman named Sarah Crease look after her son. Sarah would also look after John after Kate was out of prison, just so, you know, he was cared for and he was looked after. So Sarah was a charwoman, which is another name for a maid. And she was a maid for a woman named Mrs. Loder, who lived in Richmond in London. Sarah unfortunately fell ill, and Mrs. Loder was out of a charwoman. Is it charwoman? Is it charwoman? Again, my pronunciation may be totally wrong. In comes Kate. She's like, it's my way out, isn't it? It's my way out of crime. I am going to just cover for Sarah. While Kate was stood in as a replacement for Sarah for Mrs. Loder as the charwoman, the maid, she was introduced to Julia Martha Thomas. Now, Julia was looking for a new maid, a new servant, and the two were introduced. Julia, for some reason, just didn't ask any questions about Kate's past, about what had happened, and I don't know if that was the norm back in the day. I don't know if that was something that they just didn't do. It could have been. But Julia didn't ask any questions. She just hired her on the spot and was like, yep, you come work with me. And in the beginning, it worked super well. The relationship between Julia and Kate quickly turned sour, and Kate was spending more time in the pub than she was actually working for Julia. After this, Julia started to just heavily criticise everything that Kate did in the house. If Kate was going to clean a room, Julia would come in and point out little bits that she hadn't done, like, oh, there's a speck of dust on the window, or, oh, you missed a bit on that curtain pole. Kate really started to resent Julia, and the relationship just went downhill. Julia said that Kate often showed a nasty spirit towards her, and this made her feel super uncomfortable in her own house. So what she would often do is, if Julia had friends round, she would try to convince them to stay a little bit longer, just so she didn't have to be in a room alone with Kate. Around a month later, things came to a bit of a head, and Julia decided that she was going to fire Kate. It was arranged for Kate to stop working for Julia on the 28th of February, but Kate had managed to convince her to let her stay on for 3 more days just so she can get things together and kind of find a new place to live, so her final day was the 2nd of March. Kate was usually given Sunday afternoons off. Even though Kate had Sunday afternoons off, she was still expected to help Julia set up for her church service. Her final working day was actually on a Sunday too, so she was still expected to be home in the evenings to help Julia out with the church service. Kate decided on that day that she was actually going to go and see her son, John, with Sarah, and that she was also going to go to the pub, and she came home late, to which Julia was incredibly annoyed. When Kate finally arrived back at the cottage, Julia and Kate got into it. They were arguing, and Julia went to the church service and seemed really agitated, according to other churchgoers. She was just fuming. It was around 9 p.m. when Julia got home from the church, and she got home usually a little bit later than this, but as soon as Julia walked in, there was an argument between the two women. Now, the details are a little bit unclear here. So it is said that as Julia was taking her hat off to kind of get unready and kind of do what she normally does on an evening, Kate hit her on the back of the head with an axe, which then led on to a struggle out into the hallway, to which Kate threw her down the stairs. But I was a little bit unsure on the details purely because I don't know if she was hit and then went into the hallway in a struggle, or there's another one. There's another one here. It's also reported in some places that Kate pushed her down the stairs and then like beat her with the axe, but again, it could be either or. Either way, the one detail that we do know is that Kate pushed Julia down the stairs. Now I know what you're thinking. Neighbours? Did the neighbours hear anything? And apparently all they heard was just a loud thump, which they just assumed was a chair falling over. So even though the neighbours had heard this loud thump, nobody came to investigate. They just kind of left Kate to it. Meanwhile, while the neighbours were not doing anything, which I don't blame them for, and I don't think anybody can blame them for, Kate was a bit taken aback. She was like, what do I do with this body? So she thought, I'll dismember it. Kate started to dismember Julia's body by cutting off the limbs, and she tried to boil it down. So by doing that, she would boil the bones and the limbs, and she tried to get rid of it that way. So the neighbours at this time, even though they'd heard a thump, later on down the line, they also said that they noticed a really foul, unpleasant smell. Kate decided that she was just going to try and keep up appearances. So she decided that she was going to just carry on as normal. The day after, she was washing Julia's laundry. She was hanging it up on the line. She was running errands. She was doing everything that she normally would, as if Julia was still alive, to try and cover up the act that she had just done. She was acting as if Julia was completely fine and that she was alive and well, but behind the scenes, Kate was still trying to get rid of the evidence of what she had done. Even though Kate was acting like everything was completely fine and nothing had gone wrong and Julia was alive and well and she was doing the washing and she was doing the errands and she was doing everything that she could, behind the scenes she was packing all of Julia's limbs into separate bags, one being a black Gladstone bag and another being a wooden bonnet box. Every part of Julia, besides her head and one of her feet, was able to fit into these two containers. Kate decided that she was going to take the foot and dispose of it in a rubbish heap in Twickenham. The head is another story, we'll come to that later on. There's a whole thing about the head. So even though Kate had murdered Julia and she was really doing well at keeping up appearances apparently, she decided she wanted to go like that one step further and do some identity theft. So she decided that she would pretend to be Julia. Because she was on this now identity theft train, she decided that she was going to wear one of Julia's silk dresses and travel to Hammersmith. While she was travelling to Hammersmith, she took Julia's remains along with her too in the black Gladstone bag. In Hammersmith, she decided that she was going to go and find some old neighbours of hers and introduce herself as Mrs. Thomas. She decided that she wanted to invite them out for a couple of drinks. So off they went to a local pub with some remains. Along the way of going to the pub, Kate disposed of Julia's remains. Just a sly little, I guess, slight little throw. Like, how do you do that? Like, if you're walking with someone, do you just, oops, but then don't look in the bag? Like, what do you do? How did she do that? It is suspected that she did drop them into the Thames River. These were never recovered, these remains. But how did she do that? She wasn't done here. Like, of course she wasn't. The neighbours that she'd asked to go out to the pub, she had actually asked the son of the family to help her carry a really heavy box. She needed to get the box from her house to the train station. You can guess what was in that box. Bizarrely, Kate, as they were carrying the box, I'm assuming they were carrying it kind of, you know, together, Kate just dropped the box into the Thames. The son questioned nothing. He said nothing. Julia managed to brush it off as if nothing happened and it was an accident and it wasn't that big of a deal. But why would you not question the fact that you just dropped a box into the river that you owned? Like, how is she doing this? The day after, a coal porter called Henry Wheatley had actually come across a box next to a riverbank. He thought that it might have just been some discarded stuff from a robbery, like, you know, just don't need that, it's just a box. But when he opened it, he was greeted with body parts. Around the same time, the foot that wouldn't fit into the box or the bag was found in Twickenham. The police knew about the two incidents and they believed it to be connected, so they kind of put it all together as one kind of case, but they couldn't identify who this woman was. All they knew was that it was most likely a young woman with dark hair. They couldn't determine a cause of death, and they just named it as suspicious. The media and the papers obviously ran rampant with this story, and they named it the Barnes Mystery, which is what I mentioned earlier on at the beginning, I think. If not, then this is also called the Barnes Mystery. Can't remember if I said that. Might have said it, don't know. Kate, though, was still trying to get rid of some of Julia's body. Even though some of the body had been found, she still had more that she was trying to get rid of. Reported that at this time of Kate trying to get rid of more parts of Julia, that she offered 2 pots of lard to a neighbour, and this lard is suspected to be the body fat of Julia. A local landlady of a pub also reported Kate coming in and trying to sell the lard to customers and to the pub, saying that it was the best beef dripping. This part, that part, the whole dripping part, is all just suspicion. There's no evidence to say that she did that. She could have done that. I wouldn't put it past her at this point, but there's no evidence, and you'd really hope that she didn't do that, because that's fully disgusting. This whole case is disgusting, but like, that made me feel sick when I read that. Kate somehow carried on living at 2 Mayfield Cottages for a while. She was getting away with the fact that Julia was just missing. No one had seen her, but this isn't unusual. Julia would often go away for months at a time, and people would just, they expected that from her at this point. She liked to travel, so I guess people didn't really see much of a difference. Like, you know, Julia's obviously just gone travelling somewhere. We now know that that wasn't the case, and it wasn't long until Kate eventually slipped. Kate had decided that she was going to try to sell some of the furniture that Julia owned, and a man named John Church, who was a victualler, or a victualler, I can't say the name, he would offer to buy the furniture from her. Now, a victualler, can I just say, is a person that sells food and other like items like that at sea. John was going to give her £18 in advance to keep the furniture for him, so she went ahead with that deal. The neighbours at this time had become super suspicious of Kate, though. They hadn't seen Julia in a while, and they had this weird sneaky little feeling that something was wrong. On the 18th of March, a removal horse came to collect the furniture for John Church from the cottages. Mrs. Ives, who was actually Julia's landlord, lived next door, so she lived at Mayfield Cottages as well. She decided that because she was real suspicious of what was going on, she was going to confront the removal men about what was going on, what they were buying, who they were buying from. The removal men, obviously not knowing any different, said that they were buying the furniture from Mrs. Thomas. Because they had answered honestly, they also gave a little bit of a description of what Mrs. Thomas looked like, and they described Kate. Kate discovered that Mrs. Ives knew that Julia wasn't around, that she knew that Kate was pretending to be Julia, so she ran. John Church had managed to get just a small amount of the furniture that Kate had offered him, and he realised that Kate had tricked him completely. Inside these furniture bits that he had, he found a letter addressed to Julia, and this is when he realised that things were just not right. He immediately thought that the whole thing was weird, so he called the police and reported it. The police then went to 2 Mayfield Cottages, where they found an array of human body parts and bones. They found blood stains, they found finger bones, they found like fatty deposits in the copper. They found evidence that something had happened here. So they searched around more, and they found a letter which had the home address of Kate and her family home found that on a letter in there, so they instantly put out a search warrant, like a wanted poster for Kate. But they also put out a wanted kind of notice for her son, John, and I don't really know why they've done that. Because of Kate's mad history with the law and the fact that she loved to steal back in the day, she was well known within the police, and the descriptions given, they knew instantly who they were looking for. They tracked her down to her uncle's farm, and lo and behold, she was there. She was arrested on the 29th of March and she was taken back to London. Kate's trial started on the 2nd of July 1879. The case at Magistrates' Court before this trial was filled with people. There were people outside, there was an immense crowd just gathering around the place where Kate was getting trialed at. The courtroom was filled with people just wanting to know details, and it actually attracted royalty. Apparently, the future King of Sweden turned up to watch the proceedings, so the news of this murder had gone global. During the trial, evidence was given from a local bonnet maker, or a hat maker as we would now know them to be, and this woman was called Maria Durden. Maria said that around a week before the murder of Julia, she had spoken to Kate, and Kate had said that she was going to Birmingham to sell some jewellery that her aunt had left her. She also said that she was going to be selling a house that her aunt had left her. The prosecution used this and said that this was absolute evidence that this murder was premeditated, that it was all planned out from the start. The jury in the end decided that she was guilty. The whole way through her trial and her arrest, Kate would consistently say that she had nothing to do with the murder. She would proclaim her innocence constantly. Kate also tried to tie two people in to this to say that they did it, and these two people were John Church, the guy that literally just wanted to buy furniture, and the neighbour's son. Both of these people had super strong alibis, so that was out straight away. Back in the 1800s, death penalties were super popular for crimes like this. Kate was no exception to this rule. Once that sentence was passed onto her, she was asked whether there was any reason why she would have the death penalty not given to her, to which she said that she was with child. At the time when someone was given the death penalty and they were pregnant, there's no positive way to really tell whether people were pregnant back in the day. So what they used to do is they used to get a group of people to come up and feel the person's stomach to see if they could feel any movement, to see if they could feel any child in there at all. This happened with Kate, and they decided that she wasn't pregnant, there was no child there at all, so she got given the death penalty. This, though, obviously doesn't mean anything. Kate could have been pregnant at that time. Just because you don't feel any movement or anything doesn't mean that, you know, it's a bit of a, I don't like that fact that someone else decides whether she's pregnant or not. She could well have been pregnant. A few days before the execution was set, she managed to file an appeal, but this appeal was turned down. Kate had also tried to implicate Strong, the possible father of her child, in this murder. She said that Strong was kind of responsible for the murder, that he had a part, and that also it was his fault that she went into a life of crime. So the day before her execution, she retracted everything that she said about Strong. She retracted everything that she said about, like, the neighbours. She fully admitted it. She realised at that point that, yes, she needs to just own up. She admitted to murdering Julia Thomas. Kate was taken to the gallows on the 29th of July at 9 a.m. and she was hung for her crimes. She was then buried in an unmarked grave in the exercise yard of the prison. Now, it's not the end of the story. I know it's been a long one. The house that this happened in was actually put up for auction, and it was reoccupied in 1987. But because of the reputation it had of what happened, people didn't really want to be there. Maids and servants and people that worked for people that lived in that house would refuse to go into certain areas. They didn't want to work there as a whole. So it was, yeah, it kept its reputation. The furniture that John Church had bought, like the rest of it, was actually given to him, and certain parts of the house were sold off in auction as well, like the copper that Julia was boiled in, that was sold off for 5 shillings. Somebody wanted that. They bought it for 5 shillings. That is still not the end of it. Like, there's more to this. Remember, like, you can just rewind if you don't, I guess, but the head. I never mentioned anything about the head, and there's a reason, because the head, up until really recently, like, where is it? What happened? What happened? Where was she keeping that head? There were rumours that she just carried it round with her everywhere she went. She just would carry the head of Julia in a bag. But up until recently, we had no idea where this head was located. It was a mystery. In 1957, the house between 2 Mayfield cottages and the pub was auctioned off and was bought. So the hole-in-the-wall pub was actually closed down, but it's now being renovated and it's all kind of coming back up and it's all very great. But in this renovation, something cropped up. October of 2010, some workmen were carrying out work in the garden of the pub, like the back area of the pub, where they came across something dark, circular, round, in the ground. They didn't want to touch it. They knew it wasn't a rock. So, what was it? It was a human skull, and the skull was a woman's skull. So with our technology now, we were able, well not we, I wasn't part of it, with the technology that we have now, they're able to kind of determine different things from bones from years and years ago, and it's all so amazing. And what they had found was quite interesting. So the skull was investigated and it showed signs of a skull fracture and low collagen levels. This is consistent with Julia being thrown down the stairs, especially the skull fracture. The collagen is also really consistent, like the low collagen levels, because that can show signs of, you know, her being boiled in the copper. Through DNA, they were able to actually say that this was Julia Martha Thomas's skull. So the skull has been found hundreds of years afterwards. And finally, the last little bit, and the reason why the case is now completely closed and the fact that the head is now found, is all down to a national treasure, Sir David Attenborough. He didn't find the skull, but he bought the house and he's doing up the pub. Not only is that man out there saving wildlife, educating us, but he's also out there solving crimes. Oh, he's such a national treasure. I love him. Anyway, that's the case of Kate and Julia Martha Thomas, and I really hope you enjoyed this. I know it's been a longer one than normal, and I really enjoyed it. I hope you guys did too. If you want to follow me on any other socials, I guess, I'll shove it all down in the description. I normally... Stop, I can't touch it. I keep wanting to touch it. Sorry. If you want to follow me on anything else, like I said, it's all in the description. I'll be back next week with a supernatural video, because I've decided to just do it weekly, possibly bi-weekly. We'll see how it goes. But I hope you enjoyed it. I really enjoyed myself, and I'll see you guys later on. Let me know if you want me to do a certain case as well, like well into this stuff. I kind of have an idea for the supernatural one, because it kind of ties into true crime, kind of ties into supernatural. It's all super good. It's all really fun stuff. So I hope you enjoyed it. I'm gonna go play Bayonetta now, because I bought it on Steam yesterday, so I'm gonna go do that. Okay, bye.